Right, well, let's get started. Welcome everyone to our November NPA Smart Skills course. My name is Amy Wilson. I'm the NPA's Marketing Director and Office Manager. We do want to welcome you to our NPA Smart Skills session, which is a free virtual course for NPA members. They're monthly 75-minute classes that are taught by experts that focus on a variety of topics, building skills that are critical to the professional and personal success of postdocs. Postdocs can earn a certificate of completion for SmartSkills by attending 10 out of 12 classes in a calendar year. You can check online for our full lineup of 2025 speakers. We do only have one session left for this year, and we'll be continuing into 2026. We already have a really great schedule lined up for that, and which we'll be publishing in the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions about SmartSkills or the schedule, you can reach us at contact@nationalpostdoc.org, which is listed there on the slide. So right now we have all of our participants muted. We ask that you turn off your video just in the interest of bandwidth and making sure that we're able to conduct this session smoothly. We encourage you to ask questions of our presenter in the Q&A tab. The presentation itself will be about 45 minutes, and then we'll have dedicated Q&A after. After that, we will dismiss everyone because our last section is reserved for our NPA Impact Fellows, and we will just ask for other attendees to exit the session. This session is being recorded and will be archived on the NPA's website in the webinar archives. And we do just want to remind everyone that our NPA annual conference will be taking place in San Francisco, California, March 13th and 14th at the Hyatt Regency San Francisco. Registration is currently open. So we would encourage you, if you're able to join us. It's a great 2 days of networking, professional development, and career advancement. We are updating our agenda with confirmed sessions and posters, and we really just look forward to everyone joining us for that. We have negotiated a special lodging rate of $249 a night plus tax for the hotel, and that is valid through February 16th, I believe. So we encourage everyone to secure their lodging as soon as possible. We would like to take a moment to highlight our NPA Volunteer of the Month, and there's a little typo there. That's supposed to be November 2025. Nisha Isak Kumar, who is a postdoctoral research associate at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Nisha is part of the postdoc committee and said that through this experience, I developed a sharper eye for detail, enhanced my writing and editing skills, learned to manage deadlines effectively, and strengthened my leadership abilities. Overall, it has been a truly fulfilling experience. And we encourage anyone who is interested in volunteering with the NPA to do so. We always welcome them. You can be a postdoc, office leader, any role in your career. It's a fantastic profession. You'll gain advocacy, business development, resource development, engagement, meetings. These are all available to you when you volunteer with the NPA. We have the link there on the screen, and my colleague Christy will drop that in the chat also. If you have any questions about volunteering, you can reach out to contact@nationalpostdoc.org. But for today's session, as mentioned, this is our November session. It is on imposter syndrome. We're being led by Maureen Gannon, a professor of medicine in the Division of Diabetes, Endocrinology, and Metabolism in the Department of Medicine at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. At the end of this session on better understanding imposter syndrome, you should be able to interpret your scores from the self-assessment, define the imposter syndrome and its characteristics, recognize how the imposter syndrome can impede career progress, use practical tools to mitigate feelings of imposter syndrome, and help others who have feelings of imposter syndrome. At the end of the session, you will receive an evaluation. We ask you to complete those as it helps the NPA and speakers know what topics you'd like to hear from them. But with that, I will be turning over to Maureen.
Great. Okay. Um, Thank you so much, Amy. And I want to thank the NPA organizers for inviting me to spend part of the afternoon with you. It's my pleasure to be here. And I'm excited about this whole program. I didn't really know anything about it prior to being invited to participate. So I'm really excited to see so many postdocs joining the meeting and participating in these activities. I think it's really beneficial for your career advancement. And I want to apologize for my lighting situation. I tried to get the lighting worked out. I'm in a new office and I haven't quite gotten it worked out yet. So apologies if I'm in some shadow as the sun starts to set here in Nashville. So as Amy said, I'm a professor in the Department of Medicine, and I run a basic science research laboratory. My lab studies genes and signaling pathways that regulate the development, function, and regeneration of the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. I spend 50% of my time running my lab, and the other 50% of my time, I'm the Associate Dean for Faculty Development for approximately 4,000 faculty in the clinical departments within the School of Medicine at Vanderbilt. So I wear two different hats. In the question and answer period, if there's anything that you would like to ask about those sorts of things, I'm happy to address any comments, questions that you might have. But what you'll notice in what I just told you about myself is that I do not do research on the imposter syndrome. I have not had specific training in the imposter syndrome. So you might say, well, why am I here talking to you about this? Well, early on in my leadership development training, when I was vice chair for faculty development for the Department of Medicine, this started in 2011. I was appointed to that role. And my department chair at the time sent me to a workshop sponsored by the AAMC. It was in San Antonio, and it was a 3 or 4 day workshop for specifically for women for their professional career development. And there were some breakout sessions that we could sign up for. And one of them was on the imposter syndrome. And I had not heard that term before. Again, this was 14 years ago. I think people talk about it a lot more, know about it a lot more than they did then. But I read the description of what it was and what they were going to be talking about. And I thought, oh my goodness, I feel like this all the time. I have to go to this session. And this was on day 3 of the 4-day conference. And by then I had met, many women in leadership positions across medical centers across the United States, some of whom I thought were very confident, had it all together, actually were a little bit intimidating to me. And I walked into the imposter syndrome session, and there were some of the very women that I had been impressed with for the last few days. And I said to them, what are you doing here? You don't need this. And they said, oh my gosh, when I read the description, I felt like this is how I feel all the time. So I tell you that because I think it's important that we broaden our concept of who we're working with, working for, interacting with, networking with, who might actually have feelings of imposter syndrome, and maybe we wouldn't realize or think that they would be somebody who would have these sorts of feelings. So that's going to be one of the themes that I talk about, just broadening your idea of who might be susceptible to these sorts of feelings. So I learned about it then 14 years ago. I spoke with the people who ran that session. I got their slides. I've adapted them over time. I do a lot of reading on my own to supplement the information, and I update these slides pretty often when new information comes out. So that is my background. So as Amy said, these are the objectives. She's already read that to you, so I'm not going to go through that. So we'll just move on. One of the things that I want you to be aware of is that the research in imposter syndrome shows that 70% of people who are in high performing careers, which is all of you, 70% are expected to have feelings of experience of at least one episode of imposter syndrome in their professional lifetime. So that's the vast majority of people. So whether you have this frequently or don't have these feelings very frequently, the odds are you're going to have these feelings at least once during your professional career. So I think it's really important that we're all aware of it and that we can recognize it and learn how to deal with it should those feelings arise. So we're going to start off just by defining what imposter syndrome is and isn't. You're going to hear me use the word imposter syndrome feelings throughout the presentation. I'm not going to ever say somebody has imposter syndrome. It's not like you have the flu or you have diabetes. You know, imposter syndrome is really a cluster of feelings. It's really an emotional reaction. So imposters suffer from feelings that they are less competent than others perceive them to be. So this is really how the person who has these feelings think that other people perceive them. And these feelings can override successes that the person has had or external proof, objective proof of their competence. And this is very situational. It may only happen in your professional spheres, and in other aspects of your life, you may feel like you're not an imposter. You may feel completely confident in those other parts of your life. So these feelings are very situational. It does not mean that the person feels this way all the time in all the facets of their life. People who have imposter syndrome feelings are usually very high achievers. So all of you on this session today, and despite that, they have persistent feelings of inadequacy. People who have imposter syndrome feelings tend to attribute their successes to external factors or things that are outside of their control rather than to their own hard work, skill, talent, training, or expertise. So what are things that you can't control? You can't control the family you were born into. You can't control the socioeconomic situation of the family you grew up in. You can't control your race, your gender. What are things you can control? How hard you study, the skills that you learn and hone, the effort that you put into something, the time you put into something. So people who have feelings of imposter syndrome tend to attribute opportunities that they have been suggested to participate in or offered, that they are due to things that are outside their control. And I want to clarify that a lot of people use the term imposter syndrome synonymously with lack of self-confidence or lack of self-esteem. It is not a synonym for those two things. These feelings can occur simultaneously in a single individual, but they're not all synonymous. So self-confidence is the ability to trust in your own ability and judgment, and self-esteem is a confidence in your inherent self-worth or that you deserve respect. Now, somebody may have low self-esteem and low self-confidence and also have feelings of imposter syndrome, but it doesn't mean that they're the same thing. And they may not all exist in the same person. And currently, imposter syndrome is not considered a mental illness or diagnosis. So I'm hoping that you were able to complete the questionnaire. Amy, did that get sent out to everyone? Do you know?
Yes, it should have been in
Great.
the emails.
Okay, thank you. So that questionnaire was developed by Dr. Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes in the late 70s, early 80s. And they are really the pioneers in the research in this area, and they coined the term imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome. They're synonymous. And this brief questionnaire has been vetted for several decades now, so you can feel very confident about the results of that score. And this questionnaire assesses your feelings about your professional or intellectual competence and how you think others perceive your competence. It also assesses your tendencies around how you respond to successful professional outcomes and when people praise you about something that you did or something you accomplished, and also the tendencies on what you attribute the reasons for your success, things that are inside your control or outside your control. Now, importantly, I am not going to ask people to put their scores in the chat. We're not going to, ask you anything about your scores. That's for your own personal business. But this is what the scores mean. So the highest score you can get is 100. And the higher the score, the more frequently and the more seriously imposter syndrome feelings can interfere with your life and your career progress. So really, anything above a 60 is something where you should really pay attention and try and learn how to mitigate these feelings. And we're going to talk about how you can do that towards the end of the session. I'm going to give you some concrete things, actionable things that you can do to try and mitigate these feelings. But if you scored lower on the assessment, that's great. But I can guarantee you, as I said, 70% of people in high performing careers, which you all are in, are going to have experienced feelings of imposter syndrome. So whether or not you personally experience that, I think it's important to understand that people that you're working with, and maybe even some of your mentors, and maybe some of the people that you're training, undergraduates, graduate students in your labs, those people may be experiencing these feelings. So understanding who's susceptible and how you can maybe help them through that, I think is an important skill that you as an emerging mentor can also develop. So again, the higher the score, the more frequently and more seriously the imposter syndrome can interfere with your life. Now, as I said, I'm not going to ask any of you your scores. But I'm going to use myself as an example. And I know that we are all scientists on this call today, and an N of 1 is not a very good experiment. But I'm going to use myself as an N of 1 just as an example to highlight some of the reasons why somebody who, from outward appearances, is very successful and accomplished in their career could actually be experiencing these sorts of feelings. So I'm just going to go over, as I said, I took this assessment that you all just took. I took that the first time in December of 2011, so 14 years ago now. And at that time, I was a tenured professor. No, I was associate professor, but I had tenure. I was vice chair for faculty development. And I had leadership roles in the Diabetes Center here at Vanderbilt, as well as my society, the American Diabetes Association. And despite that, I still scored pretty high. I scored a 72. Now, unlike things like a Myers-Briggs or a personality test, where pretty much you're going to stay that way for your whole life, when you score this imposter syndrome assessment, this is just how you are right now. So this doesn't mean this is how you're going to be all the time, okay? And so I periodically retake the assessment as I move through different phases of my career. And what you can see is that as I retake it every few years, my score has changed. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it comes back up again. So why is that? Well, the research shows that symptoms of imposter syndrome can worsen or reappear at life or career transitions. So those of you who are maybe early on in your postdoc experience might score higher because you've transitioned recently from being a PhD student to now being a postdoc. Those of you who are soon going on the job market may experience these feelings again as you move into a faculty position or some other postdoctoral fellowship experience. So if you scored high on this, I think it's really important that you remember, if you transition into a new role, if you transition into a new institution, that you might want to pay attention, especially when I talk about some of the things you can do to mitigate these feelings later on. Oops.
But that's after 6, so I don't think you were.
I'm sorry?
I'm guessing. Oh, okay.
Did somebody ask a question?
No, I think they're accidentally on mute.
Oh, okay. Okay. So who is most likely to be susceptible to feelings of imposter syndrome? Now, these are generalizations. This doesn't mean that these situations exist in everyone who has imposter syndrome, but these are some general characteristics that have been found in people who are most susceptible to getting these feelings. So they're often found in persons who are in a profession that's different from the profession of their family of origin. Now, in our case, we all have a PhD, and so it could be that you come from a family where there are no scientists, where there was nobody who was in the medical field or the science field or higher education. However, it could also be that you come from a family of artists and you are now going into law school, or the opposite. You come from parents who are lawyers and you're now in the arts. So the key thing here is that the world that you work in professionally is just very different from your family of origin. And it may make you feel like you don't belong in that profession because you didn't come from the right background. Often people who have imposter syndrome feelings are first generation in their family to go to college or first to complete graduate or professional school. They're often people who are underrepresented in that particular profession or in that position within a profession. They often lacked role models growing up, so maybe there weren't guidance counselors or people in their high school or undergraduate institution who could help them understand the best way to achieve their goals and to go down the right career path to meet those goals. So they kind of had to figure things out on their own. It used to be thought that this was more common among women who were successful, but the research shows that if you do anonymous surveys, the feelings of imposter syndrome are just as prevalent in men as they are in women. So again, want us to broaden our idea of who we think might be susceptible to these feelings. I think women in general maybe talk about things more, but men can be experiencing these feelings just as frequently as women. And more recently, it's come to light and being discussed that even those who experienced privilege growing up may also feel that they don't belong, that maybe they didn't earn the spot that they have, or they didn't earn this opportunity because they had things easy. So I've talked with people who come from families who were well-to-do, could send them for tutors, could get them help for their SAT, for getting into medical school, and they feel like, well, I didn't earn those things. My family helped me. If I hadn't come from a family of origin that had the means to provide me with all those advantages, I wouldn't be here. So again, things that are outside of your control may make you feel like you didn't earn that position. And those are feelings of imposter syndrome. Okay, so just a little bit about me. So why might I be susceptible to those sorts of feelings? I showed you my scores. So I am from Queens, New York, here. This is Long Island, in case you guys don't recognize it. And this is Queens, which is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. And so I grew up there, and this is the neighborhood that I grew up in. So it was a, blue collar, middle class type of neighborhood, very ethnically diverse. We grew up a couple of blocks away from this street, which was super busy. Street with different restaurants and shops of all different ethnicities, and a part of the New York City subway system that's outside, kind of noisy. This is my family of origin. This is my mom, and I have 2 younger sisters. I'm the oldest. And I am the only one in my family who has a PhD. I'm the only one who, of the 3 of us, that went to a 4-year college. My dad did not attend college. My mom did. She was an elementary school teacher and actually didn't like science. So it's kind of funny that I ended up in science. But growing up, we really didn't have a lot of money. We received food stamps. We were on public assistance. We had lovely neighbors and people from our church who used to give us some clothing donations, food donations. So the world that I find myself in now, where people are making good salaries and are able to, go on vacations and do lots of things for their kids, that's not how I grew up. And so, that can make someone feel like they don't really belong in the world that they are in right now. Because of the situation that my family had, I applied for some needs-based scholarships, and I was very fortunate to get a full scholarship to a all-girls Catholic high school in Queens. And this is me in my biology lab class in high school. I also got a full scholarship to college, Malloy College on Long Island. And again, logically in my head, I know that this is an honor and I was very excited to receive those scholarships, but they were needs-based scholarships. If I hadn't come from a family that didn't have socioeconomic issues, I would not have received those scholarships. So again, feeling like you earned something that, it's exciting to get it, but you earned it for a reason that's outside of your control. That can lead to feelings of imposter syndrome. After I graduated college, so I told you one of the attributes of people who have these feelings is they may have lacked role models. So I remember telling my guidance counselors that I wanted to be a scientist and get a PhD and do research. And so they told me, well, after you get your bachelor's degree, you have to get a master's degree, and then you get a PhD. You have to go in that order. And so I did that. And so I got a master's degree. And then I actually worked for a while. This is me in the lab that I worked in. I worked as a research assistant after my master's degree. And whoops. And then, when I got into the PhD program, I met all these people who had come directly from undergrad, didn't do a master's. And I said, well, how come you didn't do a master's? And they said, you don't have to do that. And so again, coming from a background where I didn't really have the guidance from people who knew what you really needed to do or didn't need to do in that career. I worked, as I said, for a while as a research assistant and then went to grad school, did a postdoc. So 25 years ago or so, I was where you all sitting. And as I told you, I got a faculty position, rose through the ranks. And then 6 years ago, was offered, I applied for and went through the interview process and was offered the role of Associate Dean for Faculty Development. And I'm the first person to hold that role. It's a new role here at Vanderbilt. And I was very excited to get that opportunity. But a couple of my colleagues said to me after I told them that I'd gotten this job, that the only reason I got the job was because there were no women in the Office of Faculty Affairs, and that looked bad on the website. And so they asked me to do it because I'm a woman. So again, that's something that's outside my control. So for someone who's already susceptible to feelings of imposter syndrome, having somebody say that to you, especially colleagues that you've worked with for over 20 years, was not very helpful. So all of this can feed into those scores going up and down, which you saw. Okay, so that's a little bit about using me as an example, just to highlight how somebody's background or things they experienced during their training could lead to these feelings of imposter syndrome. So what are the attributes of people who have these feelings? Well, first of all, it can lead to an inability to internalize an accomplishment. So if you think that you didn't earn an opportunity or that you got an opportunity because of something outside of your control, then when you succeed in that opportunity, it's hard to internalize that and celebrate that, because you may think that you didn't deserve it in the first place. So that's one attribute. Another thing is that despite external evidence, the person can remain convinced that they didn't earn the successes that they've achieved. They can attribute their successes to external factors, which we've talked about, which can include luck. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Or quota filling, which again are things that are outside of your control. You can feel that you don't have the right background or the right pedigree to be in that particular role, a feeling that other people are mistaken about your abilities and have an inflated perception of your capabilities. And because of that, you can have a fear that you don't really belong in that particular role and you're going to be found out. People are going to be find out that they made a mistake offering you that opportunity, and then the whole house of cards is going to come crashing down. So what are the consequences to yourself if this is how you're feeling and what you're experiencing? And again, it's situational. It doesn't mean that you feel this way all the time. So even though imposter syndrome is not considered a mental illness, it can lead to, if not addressed, things such as anxiety, depression, and psychological distress. And we all know that our emotions and our feelings can actually lead to physical illness. So that's another consequence if left unaddressed. People who have feelings of imposter syndrome may feel that they have to be perfect in order to be successful. So if you are concerned that somebody gave you an opportunity, you feel like you didn't deserve it, they're going to find out they made a mistake giving you that opportunity, you can feel like you have to be perfect or you're going to disappoint them. And we all know logically there is no such thing as being perfect. There is no one who is perfect, but you can still have those feelings that any little mistake means that you're a complete failure, or any little mistake means that the person's going to regret that they gave you that opportunity. And again, that's us projecting on how someone else is going to feel. We don't really know how someone else is going to feel. But this feeling of perfectionism can really be almost paralyzing. Paradoxically, there's also a fear of success. So if you're afraid of letting people down, disappointing them, you can also worry that, well, if you succeed, what's going to happen? They're going to ask you to do something else again, right? Maybe even something with more responsibility. So that can lead to a cycle of this fear of failing and then fear of success because it's going to happen all over again. So those are the consequences to yourself, to your health, to your emotions, to your mental health, to your physical health. But what are the consequences to your career? So I think of my career as kind of a living entity that's separate from me that I have to nurture. So there's, me, Maureen, but then there's also my career. That's something that I really look out for and try to take care of, and nurture and grow. So if you have feelings of imposter syndrome, you can end up setting a lower performance expectancy for yourself because you're less likely to fail if you set the bar low. But by avoiding new challenges because you're afraid of failing, you also could avoid new exciting opportunities and new successes. And I think that's really sad. So this is one of the main reasons that I feel like we really have to work on overcoming these feelings, because there may be something that you didn't know you'd enjoy, or there may be something you didn't even know you were going to be good at. And by avoiding those challenges that you're afraid of or concerned of, you might miss out on that. And not only is that disappointing for you, but the institution, your organization, your department, your lab is missing out on that. So by you avoiding challenges and setting the bar low, the organization, your colleagues, your collaborators are also not getting your full self and your best. So that's one of the reasons I think we all really need to work on this if we scored high. As you move into different aspects of your career, your first faculty position, another position, whether that's in industry, in advocacy, in policy, wherever you go from your postdoc, you have to negotiate for things that you need to be successful in that role, whether that's salary, resources, administrative help, space, equipment. If you feel that you didn't deserve that opportunity and that position, it's actually going to hinder your ability to advocate and negotiate for the resources that you need to be successful in that position. And again, this idea about not being able to internalize accomplishments and enjoy successes. I think we should all be able to celebrate successes that we have. We all know all the disappointments we have in science, papers getting rejected, grants getting rejected. So being able to enjoy things when they are successful, when we do accomplish them, and being able to realize that that was due to our hard work and efforts, I think is really important. So talked about consequences to self, consequences to your career. So how can we overcome this? If you are someone who scored high, if you're someone who didn't score high, but you may know people who have these feelings. So first of all, the person who's experienced these feelings has to work on learning to accept that they had a role in their successes, and an important role. At some point, you may have been given an opportunity that others weren't, whether that was a scholarship or something else. The reason why you got that opportunity may not be 100% clear to you. You may therefore think that the things you achieve after that aren't really deserved. But I want to point out to you, it doesn't really matter why you were given an opportunity. It's what you do with it afterwards. That's all on you, right? So anything you achieve after you get the opportunity is all you, right? So learning how to internalize that is really important. So try to be objective. Look at the data. We're scientists, right? Your CV, you can act as your living document of your objective data of what you have accomplished. So I encourage all of you to keep an updated CV all the time. Anytime you give a talk, give a poster, win an award, have a paper accepted for publication, immediately update your CV. Okay, you mentor a new student, update your CV. All of those things are objective things that you have done that you have accomplished. And so by keeping that living document, you keep a running tab of all the things you've accomplished. So let's talk about some actions we can take to try and mitigate these feelings. So first of all, understand why you're having these feelings. We talked about who's most susceptible. Maybe you can do some self-reflection, think about things in your background, in your upbringing, in your training that may have led you to have these feelings. Being able to talk to others about it. It could be a counselor or therapist, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be a trusted peer or a friend that you can share these feelings with and talk about it together. Making a list of your successes and accomplishments, like I said, that can be your CV. But if you're struggling, thinking about, well, what are some of the things that I've done that would count as a success or accomplishment? Get somebody that you trust to help you make that list. Do that for each other. Getting honest feedback from people that you trust, right? Somebody who has your best interests at heart, who wants you to be successful, who wants you to move forward in your career. Get honest feedback from them. What are the things that are your strengths? What are the things that you need to work on? We all have things that we need to work on. So getting that helpful feedback from somebody who really cares about you is important. It may not be realistic to completely eliminate these feelings, but we can all work on strategies to reduce or to manage them. So being realistic about your strengths or weaknesses. If you do have weaknesses, maybe that's public speaking, maybe it's writing, maybe it's time management, maybe it's putting together PowerPoint presentations. Seek feedback from people that you trust, whether those are your peers, advisors, mentors, and be proactive about doing things to fill in gaps in that skill set or training. When you do accomplish something and somebody says to you, oh, that was a great job. I really enjoyed that talk, or great job on that poster, or you did such a good job teaching that class. Just say thank you. That will help you learn how to internalize things and not brush them off. So a lot of times when people compliment on things, we qualify our thank you. So somebody might say, that was a great talk. I really loved it. You might say something like, oh, thanks. I meant to say this one thing on slide 5 and I forgot. And when I practiced it, I said it and then I forgot. So I'm kind of a little upset that I didn't say that. Don't do that. When somebody says they enjoyed your talk, you say, thank you, I'm glad you liked it. Or thank you, that means a lot to me. And leave it there. Don't qualify it. Don't make excuses. Ask your mentors and advisors to tell you their stories. You might see somebody who is in a role, a leadership role, and think that that means that they had a smooth path and everything went well for them, and there were no obstacles to their success. That's probably not true. So ask them about their training. Ask them about their career experiences. What are some of the obstacles that they had to deal with and overcome? What are some of the things that didn't go very well for them? And how did they deal with that? So learning that everyone has had bumps in the road will normalize that and will make you see that there is no one right path to success. And that will help you realize that you could be somebody who is just as successful in your career. This is another thing that I recommend. This is a book that I read many years ago. It's available on Amazon, and it's a short read. It's a pretty thin paperback. But this really is like a cognitive behavioral therapy technique. So it helps you visualize in your mind being successful. And this is a technique that athletes use a lot. You've probably seen, gymnasts or snowboarders or skaters in the Olympics right before they take the ice or, go into the half pipe. They're up there doing their routine in their head, and they're literally visualizing the whole thing. And like they're watching a movie of themselves doing it successfully and everything going really well. That's what creative visualization is. And you can do this in things in your own profession, in your own career. And it really helps for you when you are actually in the real situation. You feel like you've practiced it, you've been through it, you visualized how it was going to go and going well. And it makes it actually a little easier and you're a little calmer when you actually have to do it. So the more you practice at something, even if that's in your head, the better you'll get. And remember, symptoms may worsen or reappear at life or career transitions. So how do you move past this? As we work on these things, you have these practical tools now that you can refer back to and think about when you move to a new career position or you move up the ladder in your career. So think about, who do you look up to in your institution? Who has a role or a position that is a role model to you that you would like to be? Is there a position or role to which you aspire? Is there a new skill that you would like to learn? That could be a hard skill like microscopy or flow cytometry, but it could be a soft skill. It could be better communication skills, better conflict management skills. What are the skills that you would like to learn that you think are going to be key to be successful in that role to which you aspire? So don't let imposter syndrome feelings prevent you from trying to reach those goals, to reach that role to which you aspire, and to learn the new skills that you would like to learn. So there's no failure in applying for something and nominating yourself for something or trying something new, a new opportunity. There is no failure. There's just opportunity for growth, learning, new experiences. Here at Vanderbilt, they ask the faculty every year when we get the incoming graduate students to sign up for a slot where we'll give our failure talk to the students. And every year I tell them, I would be very happy to come and talk to the new students, but I'm not going to talk about my failures because that's not how I see it. So I tell them I'm going to talk about the things that didn't go the way I thought they were going to go. So there's no failures in submitting a grant that doesn't get funded. You learn from that. There's no failure in submitting a paper that doesn't get accepted. You learn from that. And so by reframing things, not as failures, but as learning experiences and opportunities to grow, I think that will allow you to take more risks and not have to worry about failing. Okay, so this is my last slide, and then we're going to open it up for comments and questions. So the parting advice I have to you is you are the only thing in life that you can control. You cannot control your family of origin. You cannot control where you grew up. You cannot control some of the things that people might say to you that are not very helpful in your career. The only thing you can control is how you respond to all of that. So ultimately, it matters more what you do with an opportunity rather than why you were given that opportunity. So I just encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities, make the most of them, try and find new things that you're good at, that you enjoy, that maybe you didn't know you were. And then remember, you are the one who's responsible for your path in life and how you respond to all the things that come your way. So now I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for discussion. And I don't know how we want to do this, Amy, if you want to.
I'm fine to read the questions and then you can respond.
Okay.
So if anybody else does have questions, feel free to submit them now using the Q&A tab, and we will get to those. The first one says, "Hi, thank you for this presentation and for sharing something personal. I am sure it's helping many of us. Do you think anxiety could be also a cause rather than a consequence of imposter syndrome?"
So thank you for your comments. So I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so I wouldn't presume to diagnose anyone who has feelings of anxiety or to know how that may manifest in different people. But I could imagine that if you are someone who has feelings of anxiety, that yes, I think that could definitely contribute to feelings of imposter syndrome. So I do think that that's something that if you are someone who suffers from anxiety, that's something that you should share, that you have those feelings of imposter syndrome, share that with your therapist. And there's really great cognitive behavioral therapy that can help with that. One of the things that I think is very helpful in those sorts of situations is journaling. So I don't know if journaling is something that you do currently, but there are some really great journals on Amazon that are specifically designed for those sorts of feelings: anxiety, imposter syndrome, career development. There's some really nice journals that you can get on Amazon. And so I would recommend trying that and writing those feelings down and then discussing them with a counselor or a therapist that you might see.
Thank you for that. So the next question says, "Similar to high functioning depression, is there such a thing as high functioning imposter syndrome? You strive for bigger goals, but constantly second guess yourself and often struggle in negotiations, such as the salary discussion you mentioned, and sell yourself short. How can one navigate this?"
So that's a great question. I haven't heard of the term high functioning imposter syndrome, so that's not something that I've heard. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Um, but I do think that there are people who, despite feelings of imposter syndrome, do continually put themselves out there, and I applaud that. Um, if you are concerned about your ability to negotiate, there's a couple things you can do. First of all, again, there's some great books out there, Getting to Yes, difficult conversations, things like that. But I would role play with someone. I would get a mentor, an advisor. If there's a position that you have applied for or you're interested in applying for, um, often faculty have been on search committees. They'll know the types of questions that you will get asked in an interview. And I would set up an appointment and role play with them and work through it. Again, then you can do your creative visualization, right? You can imagine being asked those questions and having your answers prepared. It's much better to practice something than to walk into something cold. So I would suggest doing that. And then you'll feel more prepared. What is a typical salary? What should I ask for? What's a typical startup package? So you want to talk to people who've been through it recently, and have negotiated themselves a startup package, and people who've been on search committees, and what the types of things that they are looking for so that you can be prepared.
Thank you. So the next one says, it can be difficult to have big picture, deep conversations with mentors, especially when there are weekly deadlines in the lab. How would you encourage us to approach our mentors about discussing their journey, their learning experiences, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so hopefully you all have regularly scheduled meetings with your mentors. Sometimes it's once a week or every other week. Um, so I would suggest that would not be the time that you would want to bring up a conversation like this. I think that time is probably best used to talk about your experiments, your results, the direction of your project, things like that. So I would ask your mentor if you could schedule a time that's separate from your regularly scheduled meeting. Maybe go get a cup of coffee, maybe go for lunch, and ask them for a time that's a little bit less restricted, that you could get some career advice, talk to them about your goals. So I think doing it outside of your regular meeting, discussing your project is probably the best way to do it. And I think most people, maybe not everybody, but most people like talking about themselves and like sharing what they've been through and their background. And so if you say, I'd like to get your perspective, I'd like to get your advice, I'd love to hear about your journey. You'll find, I think, that most people are very open to doing that.
Thank you. I'm going to give us a couple more seconds to get any last minute questions in. While we wait to see if those come through, I do just want to remind everyone that this session has been recorded and will be available in our webinar archives. You will also receive an evaluation that we ask you to complete so that the NPA and our speakers have an idea of what topics you're looking for or any feedback you may have on their session. Like I said, that will come through the email. I'll also drop it in the chat. It does look like we have one more question.
Okay.
So you mentioned that low self-confidence is similar but distinct from imposter syndrome. Have you done a similar presentation to help with self-confidence? I'm interested in the overlap and advice for managing self-confidence too.
Yeah. So no, I have not. I have not done a presentation on that. That's something that I haven't done research myself on. Imposter syndrome, I read a lot of articles and perspectives and watch, TED Talks and webinars. I have not done that for self-confidence. So that's something that I would not feel is within my area of expertise. And so I would suggest maybe reaching out to the Employee Assistance Program or someone at your institution who can maybe help with that. So my apologies, but I don't know. One thing I would like to say, I usually get this question and I didn't, so I'll just, offer it anyway. A lot of times people will say when I lead these discussions, will say, well, isn't a little bit of an imposter syndrome a good thing, right? Because you can imagine somebody who doesn't think that they need any advice or that they need to work on anything, or, might be somebody who might be a little bit intolerable, right? So I think that that's true. I think that having a little bit of imposter syndrome feelings keeps you humble. It makes you realize that, we all have things that we need to work on, that nobody's perfect, might make you more empathetic towards others who are maybe struggling with an aspect of their career. So I think having a little bit of those feelings is a good thing. Um, it's when it causes stress, anxiety, worry, prevents you from accepting an opportunity or even applying for an opportunity. That's when I think it needs to be addressed. That's when I think it's gone over into being an issue. So I don't want you to think that if you have any imposter syndrome feelings, it's terrible and you should be trying to get rid of it completely, right? That's not the message.
Thank you. And we did have another one come in. So this one says, I have the same feeling and similar experience like yours, being minority in my country, first in town to achieve higher education, woman, so on. I've received multiple fellowships and awards, some of them due to being a minority or a woman, and others are too competitive. I'm always afraid to be seen as not deserving those achievements or that I won't be enough and excellent in my research and that my projects won't be good enough. It makes me feel that the expectations are too high for me and this stresses me further. How to overcome these feelings and how to keep my motivation high with all the stress of a postdoc. In each stage of my career, I have these feelings, but in different forms.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that the things that you've explained and the things you've described are perfect recipe for feelings of imposter syndrome. Um, you know, Logically, if you think about it logically, like those scholarships that I got, there was an entrance exam, right? So you even the things that you got, right? Whether that's fellowships, other opportunities, scholarships, it's still a competitive process, right? So whether those opportunities like mine were, you had to have a needs-based situation, right? But there was also an entrance exam. So it wasn't like just because my family had no money, they were going to give me a scholarship. I still had to do well on the exam, right? There was still a competitive process. That's the same for all the things that you've described in your message in the chat. All the things that you have gotten, right, were a competitive process. It wasn't automatic that you were going to get it. So there are characteristics, things in your background, your training, that made you an excellent candidate for this unique opportunity. And so I want you to try, it's not easy, but I want you to try to think about it like that. Like, I competed against other people for this and I got this award. Yes, this is a special opportunity for a category of individuals that I happen to fit. Okay. But it's still competitive. Not everybody got it. Right. So making the most of that opportunity, excelling, publishing, doing well, being excited about it, sharing it with others, mentoring others, that will really help make you feel like that you did deserve it, right? And so just thinking about it that way, trying to reframe it and realizing that it wasn't automatic, and that the attributes, the hard work, the characteristics that you brought to that application is why you got it, right? That other part is just one component. It's not the whole story.
Okay. Our next question says, how would you recommend approaching a PI who is conflict averse? I never feel like I'm getting the truth. Instead, my PI takes the easy route. And then following up on from that question, it says, this leads to imposter feelings because I never know how I am actually doing.
Yeah, I do things on conflict management if you ever want to do a talk on that. It is very hard when you have somebody who is a chronic avoider. There are definitely people like that. I think clearly for when you're working with a PI, there are things that you do need from them, right? But they're not the only person you can go to for advice. So I'm always big on having multiple mentors. Maybe your PI is a great mentor for scientific questions, for, helping you write a paper, helping you write a grant, but maybe they're not the best for career advice. Maybe they're not the best when you tell them the doubts that you have about your career abilities, right? Maybe you need somebody else for that. So would all encourage you to get multiple mentors. You probably have multiple friends. Maybe you have a friend who goes to the movies with, another friend who likes to go out and try different restaurants. So same with mentors. They're not all going to meet all your needs. So if you're not getting the type of career advice and the more soft skills that you need from your I would see if there's another mentor that you can go to get that. One of the ways that you can try and get your PI to be more engaged and not be an avoider is if you use something like a compact or an individual development plan, which many institutions are requiring. That's a great time to have a discussion that's more objective rather than going in there, because some people don't deal well with emotions. It's just how they are. Doesn't mean they're good or bad. That's just how they are. So if you go in and say like, oh, I'm feeling really stressed, or, oh, I'm feeling really low about myself, they might be like, I don't know how to deal with that. But if you go in with your individual development plan or your compact and you go through the different areas of your career, here are the things that I need to do to be successful and get a faculty position, right? I need to publish, I need to give presentations, I need to network. And if you have like that, those objectively as different sections on your IDP, and you go through and you ask for advice on how you can achieve those goals, it becomes less of an emotional talk and more of a facts and advice talk, and that they might be a little bit more comfortable with that.
Okay, for our next question, how do you overcome imposter syndrome when your colleagues are too critical to your work or thoughts? Because their thoughts may increase the doubt of yourself and the imposter syndrome feelings as well and lower the self-confidence.
Yeah, very true. First of all, I would go back to what I said in the slides is, make sure that you're getting constructive feedback from people who you trust and who have your best interests at heart. Sadly, not everyone is going to have your best interests at heart. So those people, when they say things to you that are hurtful, again, this is something that's learned over time. I'm not saying this is going to be easy. You have to kind of let it roll off your back, right? The people who don't have your best interests at heart, when they say hurtful things to you, you have to be able to turn it around and say, that is them and not me. So going to people who do care about you, who do have your best interests at heart, who you trust, and getting feedback from them, and even telling them, hey, so-and-so said this to me and it was really hurtful. What do you think they meant by that? Like, how am I supposed to take that, right? And so getting helpful advice from mentors and people that you really trust, I think is important. There's always going to be people out there who say dumb things to you, right? Like people who said to me, oh, the only reason you got that associate dean role is because you're a woman. That's not very helpful. So, I just have to realize, that person, I can't let that person bring me down, right? I'm excited about this role. I had experience, which is why I was successful. I went through an interview process. It wasn't an automatic that I got this role. So just reframing it and trying to not focus on those negative things. Again, not easy, but just practicing, focusing on the positive. Go back and make a list of your accomplishments, and realize you're not going to do everything well the first time. We're all a work in progress. We're all getting better. We all are learning. I'm sure if I went back and looked at the first grant that I wrote, I would be really embarrassed. It's all a learning, and you're just getting better and better, right? So realizing that we all have room to grow, but we want that constructive criticism and feedback on things we need to grow on from people who are giving it to us in a positive way to help make us better. If anybody's saying anything to you in a way that is personal attack or trying to bring you down or trying to make you feel bad about yourself, those are the people that you just have to say, I'm not listening to that.
Okay, and related to that, we just got a question that asks, what parameters do you use to gauge people to trust in today's world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you have to build relationships. Relationships are a two-way street. I think it does take time. But I think, again, when somebody gives you helpful feedback in a helpful way and not in a way that's belittling or putting you down or negative, you can trust them more. For example, if you give a presentation and, somebody says to you, oh, great job, and that's it. That's not really helpful. If they say, great job, your slides are so well organized, or great job, you really explained all of the acronyms and the jargon. Okay, so getting concrete reasons for the good and the weak parts of whatever you did, right? Getting that concrete feedback with things that you can hold on to, right? So something that you actually did rather than a feeling or an emotion. That's the people that you want to go to. That's the people that you trust. So if they're just talking fluff and no specifics, then that's not helpful. So I would focus on the people who really talk about things in a concrete way, in a positive way, in a building up way, whether they're things you need to work on or things that you do very well.
Thank you. And that appears to be our last question. So I do just want to take this opportunity to thank you, Dr. Gannon, for this wonderful presentation and the thought that you put into answering the questions. As you'll see from the chat, a lot of positive responses to your presentation and your
Very welcome.
responses. We just want to thank everyone for making time to attend today's session. Our next Smart Skills will be on December 16th, navigating the job market. So we encourage you guys to join us for that. A reminder, this session was recorded and will be available in our webinar archives. But now we would just ask anyone who is not one of our current NPA Impact Fellows or one of our Impact alumni to please exit the session. And we will see everyone else next month. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all.